Check 1, 2, 2. Imran?
Hi, Andrew.
Imran.
Hi, Andrew. Hello. Can you hear me? Andrew, can you hear me?
Yes, Imran, we hearing you. Just 1 second.
Check 1, 2, 2.
One, two.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this Leader of the Opposition weekly media conference with the Honorable Leader of the Opposition, Joseph Harmon. We thank you for joining us this morning. My name is Imran Khan. I'm the Director of Communication in the Office of the Leader of the Opposition. Today's proceedings will be as usual. We will have a statement by the Honorable Leader of the Opposition. He will address a number of issues, and then we will go into your questions. I'll now invite the Leader of the Opposition, the Honorable Joseph Harmon, to present his statement.
Thank
Opposition
you.
Leader, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Imran. Ladies and gentlemen of the media, Guyanese at home and the diaspora, and wherever this press conference is being live streamed, I bid you a very good morning. Today, there are several issues which confront us as a people, and which, in the view of the AP and UAFC coalition, can only be successfully achieved by an embracing of consultation and engagement with all the stakeholders in this country. The measures which affect the quality of life of our people in Guyana and are implemented by the PPP regime betrays a brutish mindset to governance and can never reflect who we are as a people. The first issue I would like to address today is this COVID-19 pandemic. This pandemic continues to be ravaging the country, and it is being mismanaged by the PPP regime. A proper national response to the COVID-19 pandemic is affected by several things. First of all, it is the government's intransigence in engaging stakeholders in the National Task Force, the COVID National Task Force. They've adamantly refused to engage. Secondly, there's a lack of trust in the government and the state apparatus that they have implemented to deal with this pandemic. Thirdly, there's a dictatorial, discriminatory manner in which the regime has handled the measures in relation to the COVID-19 pandemic. That is to say, the manner in which they have dealt with the curfew, the manner in which they have dealt with the COVID-19 cash grants, the corruption in the acquisition of vaccines and other items necessary to fight this pandemic. There's been poor or little attempt at educating the population of this country on vaccines. Many persons, many organizations have written about this, including the Guyana Human Rights Association. Now, I understand that the Minister of Health and the Minister of Education, that they are now in the process of administering the Pfizer vaccines to children who are meant to return to school very shortly. This is another issue which is of a major concern to us, because the Pfizer vaccine, as we understand it, came into Guyana 24 hours ago, 48 hours ago, 2 days ago. And the fact that they've started administering it within 24 hours of its arrival in Guyana suggests to us that they do not understand the logistic arrangements as it relates to the Pfizer vaccine. This is what the government of Trinidad and Tobago said about the administering of the Pfizer vaccines. They said that the vaccine has its particular logistic challenges as the same vaccines we're having here. They have to be stored at minus 70 degrees Celsius. And so the Trinidadians said they had theirs since February. And so it was being stored at minus 70 degrees. They're stored at minus 70, but before you could use them, the logistic challenges are a little more complex than the other vaccines. They have to be transferred to a minus 20 degrees environment for 2 days. Then once it has been stored at that minus 20 degree for 2 days, and they come down to a liquid form, you have 30 days in which to keep it at that degree. And then you can use it. The report says it is even more complex than the Sinopharm or the AstraZeneca. And those are the logistic challenges. So for a vaccine arriving in Guyana 2 days ago, according to the Minister of Health, and they're administering that vaccine within 24 hours of it arriving here, then certainly some explanation has to be given to the children, some explanation has to be given to the parents, and some explanation has to be given to this country as to what fast-track logistic arrangements you have been able to put in place to allow for this use right now. We have always said that we believe that vaccines are an important part of the armament in fighting this COVID-19 pandemic. And so we've always encouraged those measures which have been advised by the World Health Organization, using your mask, sanitation, washing your hands regularly, and social distancing. That, of course, along with vaccines, we believe present a reasonable expectation of, if not preventing you from catching disease, at least prolonging life so that you're not hospitalized for any period and resulting in ultimate death. So we believe that the vaccines have a role in that. But certainly what we do not accept is the fact that these vaccines can be made mandatory for people. We believe that there has to be a choice, and people must be made aware of their choices. And so we had a look at what has happened since vaccination started, because the government's PR machinery has rolled out in a very aggressive way against the opposition, saying that we are against vaccines. We have made this very clear, and I repeat it, that we are not against vaccines, that we support vaccination, but we believe that the education of the population is important. We have a particular issue with the Sputnik V vaccines that were acquired from the Sheikh in the United Arab Emirates, and those concerns have not been met as yet. The public has still not been given advice on that. So now we are hearing that there's a shortage of the vaccines, and those people who have lined up for the second dose, they have to wait until an indeterminate period when they will get the next set. So the whole vaccine rollout program is in shambles. And what is also very important for all of us to understand is that if you start to roll out a vaccine program, after a certain period of time, you must see some impact in the numbers of persons who are reported to be infected. All across the world, you are seeing this. And they show you the graph where so many persons have been vaccinated, and they show actually the number of infected persons coming down. In Guyana, it is a total different. We have started a vaccination program since March of 2021. And until now, we can see a dip in the numbers. In fact, the numbers keep going up and up and up. And we have over 446,000 doses that have been injected into the arms of Guyanese, and still the numbers don't show any change in that. So the ministry has to give a proper explanation why these numbers keep going up, and you're vaccinating people all the time, and the numbers of vaccinations going up, but the numbers of infected also keep going up. Today we have over 24,864 persons that are infected. The number of persons who have died as a result of COVID is 606. So this is not something that you play around with. This is not something that 3 or 4 ministers or former ministers sit in a room in some ministry and decide that the numbers are important. We are not just numbers. These are live human beings that we're dealing with. And so to play around with these figures in a manner that I suppose will allow for greater amount of funding for these projects or these programs, in our view, it is criminal. You have to be able to show some relationship between the number of persons who have been vaccinated and the fact that it has affected our numbers of persons who are infected by the virus. And it is not that we have intensified our attempts at tracing. We have not intensified our attempts at tracking. To some extent, we have intensified our efforts at treating. So vaccinations and all of the measures that are related to this pandemic, much of it has to do with the end of the scale, that is the treatment. What insofar as tracing and testing, there has been no discernible increase in our capacity to do so. And so we have to be very concerned about the manner in which this COVID-19 is being managed by Frank Anthony and the other 2 ministers who oversee him in the Ministry of Health. So in the face of a serious levels of hesitancy in some parts of this country to the vaccine, the PPP, rather than trying to engage, trying to speak to people, what they have decided to do is to enforce. They have taken this approach that once we say so, it's so, it has to be so. And so persons all across this country have decided that if you insist, we will resist. If you insist, we will resist. And to the extent that those sentiments represent the reasonable expectation and expressions of the people of Guyana, the APNU AFC support them. And so you have people in all parts of this country standing up to these levels of dictatorial behavior, demonistic behavior. People all the way from Region 9 have stood up. They're standing up. In Region 2, on the Essequibo coast, they're standing up. In Region 4, in Georgetown, on the East Coast, at Buxton, Victoria, several communities, they're standing up. In Region 5, they are standing up. In Region 6, on the quarantine, people are standing up. In Region 10, they are standing up. And it is something that is happening all across the regions of this country. Because the PPP regime, they have to understand, and it's taking them a long time to understand this, that the Guyanese people are no longer that sort of docile person that you believe that they were many, many years ago. This is a different generation. This is the new generation. This is a generation that will not sit down and accept things being forced down their throat. What I would want to recommend to this regime is that they take a look at the position which has been expressed by the Barbados Prime Minister, and which is consistent with the position which we have taken from the start. That vaccinations are an important tool in fighting the pandemic, as I said that before. But that you cannot force it down people's throat. You have to consult, you have to engage. And you saw the Barbados Prime Minister herself saying, I will go to the barbershops and so on and engage people who don't believe that they want to take this vaccine. I will consult with them. That is the extent to which, in a democratically run state, your leaders behave. Unlike what we have here for governance, we just say, look, take this, take that, take that. And it is not being properly administered for the benefit of the people of this country. I repeat our position that we are prepared to work with the regime on this particular issue. We are prepared. We have always said that we are prepared to lend our considerable skills in this regard, and we continue to do so. To the extent to which we are able, we will continue to advocate for persons to take the vaccine. We'll continue to do so, but we will not be in any arrangement which makes that mandatory. We believe that a person must have a choice. We believe that there are certain rights which are enshrined in our Constitution. We believe that there are certain rights which are personal. We believe that there are some people who would have personal conditions. And so those cannot be triumphed over or trampled over by any administration forcing this issue on people. So I would advise that that be dealt with in this way. The second issue I would like to deal with is this question of Barra Jagdeo and his statements that were made in Texas recently. He has a way of speaking to the international media when he's outside of this country and providing them with details that he would not provide to the local media. And I think it is a certain level of contempt which he has for the local media and the people of Guyana. It is that same level of contempt which has been displayed by President Irfaan Ali in his meeting with President Santokhi of Suriname, and they discussed the oil and gas and the gas to shore project. Santokhi, as soon as he arrived in Suriname, met with the media and briefed them on what his engagement was here in Guyana. But we don't have that kind of respect. We don't have that. And so Santokhi explained, and one of the issues which came out of what he explained that jumped out at me, I think jumped out at every right-thinking Guyanese, was this question of local content and what local content means. And Santokhi said to the media in Suriname that Guyana has a different understanding of what local content means. And we are talking now about shared local content. So when you think you are dealing with Guyanese, insofar as local content, the Surinamese understand that to mean local content means Surinamese. But in Guyana, what Santokhi is saying is that they're talking about shared local content, which means that when you're dealing, you're not talking about Guyanese alone. So in comes the Trinidadians and in comes all of the friends of the PPP that are now benefiting from local content. And this is what Santoki said. But here in Guyana, of course, the PPP regime will never say that to you. So most of what you hear gotta come from outside of Guyana. And so I go back to Bara Jagdeo and his statements made in Texas. He spoke about the way in which they were almost championing the environment of Guyana, that they were dealing with the environmental issues in Guyana. He spoke about that. But the point is that so? Is that so? Is Bara Jagdeo championing local content? Sorry, is challenging the environment in Guyana? What are the facts? And these are the facts. First of all, as soon as the PPP they were installed in office in August, the first thing they did was to dismantle the Department of the Environment, which was the coordinator of all of the environmental entities in this country. The second thing they did was to dismantle the Office of Climate Change and all of the skills that went along with that. The third thing that they did was to dismember the Environmental Protection Agency by removing the most qualified head of that agency we have had since it was started, Dr. Vincent Adams. Dismiss him. So when you are saying that you are championing the environment, all you are saying is that Bara Jagdeo has now taken over personally dealing with the environment. And this is what is happening. Major projects that require an environmental impact assessment go without that assessment simply because the office of the president says so. Some major projects that are going to take place in Region 3, gas to shore projects, and several other major 600 million, 200 million US projects do not require an environmental impact assessment. In addition to that, of course, it is the wanton destruction of our mangroves. Wanton destruction of our mangroves. And in May 17th, we as the APNU AFC coalition wrote all of the international agencies complaining about the destruction of our mangroves, at least 50 acres of mangroves. So when Jagdeo speaks about championing the environment, all he's speaking about is the dollars and cents that got to do with the environment itself. How much money you can make from carbon credits. That's all he's interested in, not the impact that it has on the lives of the Guyanese people and their livelihood. And so when he speaks about championing the environment, I believe that these are matters which a discerning media must ask him, what have you done about the environment that you speak so glowingly about? And then, of course, this statement that was made by Juan Edgil, who is the Minister of Public Works, that says, well, if we got to cut down mangroves, mangroves got to cut down, as simple as that. That kind of casual, laissez-faire attitude to an important issue of our environment is what the minister states. And so we cannot take very seriously these statements that are made by Jagdeo, because he's making these statements about our environment at a conference that has to do with oil. And so, you know, these are two different ends of the spectrum. And when you're talking about oil and so, you have to show how are you going to preserve your environment in an economy that is basically progressing and moving along a pathway that has to do with oil and gas. So it was a very flippant explanation in my view. But because of the sort of the chorus that was there assembled, including a particular lady who was there singing the praises of Jagdeo, I think that Guyanese people have to pay attention to these things. It is a contemptuous attitude that is displayed by Bharat Jagdeo as a vice president and as a general secretary of the People's Progressive Party. That is a mindset. And I'll come to another statement which she made about Guyanese people. A very, very serious statement which she makes about people being mentally retarded. But before I come to mental retardation, let me address a matter which, to my mind, has to do a little bit of mental retardation. And it has to do, of course, with the statements that were made by the ambassador of the United States of America at that conference, when she spoke to the fact that the involvement of the embassy and other forces of the democratic forces that changed the direction, that caused the elections to go in a certain way. And at the end of it all, she said, we won. So when Guyanese people hear that, they are listening to a PPP spokesperson. We won. But of course, our documentary, which we put out during the early part of this month, called The Theft of Democracy, highlights very clearly that position which the PPP take that's unsustainable. But to the ambassador that is singing the praises of the PPP, I say that the statements that were recently made by Congressman Hakeem Jeffries in the United States, calling for certain actions to be taken, I embrace and endorse those statements. I believe that the ambassador stepped out of line. I believe the ambassador has now made it clear to all Guyanese that she is incapable of exercising an independent judgment as a representative of a foreign state and is now openly connected to the PPP. And I joined with Congressman Jeffries in calling for an early termination of her office as ambassador in this country. And Congressman Jeffries has the correct ears, and so I'm sure that he will say that to the persons who need to hear it. But I endorse Congressman Jeffrey. The third issue has to do with this statement, again made by Jagdeo, about mental retardation, that APNU AFC supporters are mentally retarded. Well, first of all, let me say I rebuke that. I rebuke that. And I say for myself, on behalf of all of the APNU supporters and the bulk of the Guyanese people to whom he addressed that statement, that we rebuke it. We are not mentally retarded. But that is the mindset of Jagdeo as a vice president and Jagdeo as the general secretary of the PPP. Because that has to be the PPP's position. And when you say that the majority of Guyanese who support, some of them who may not have voted for us, but have supported us, that you say that they're all mentally retarded, it betrays a mindset that says Guyana belongs to a small group of people and that the rest of us are mental retards. And so in that regard, we need not be consulted on issues that affect us here in Guyana. We need not be consulted in the way in which contracts are awarded to certain companies. We need not be consulted on the manner in which certain issues are dealt with. We need not be consulted on the appointment to certain constitutional agencies. We need not be consulted about what is considered to be local content and who will benefit from local content legislation. We need not be consulted because we're all mentally retarded. And this is the attitude of the PPP. And I call on all Guyanese to wrongly condemn JAGDEO and the PPP for that labeling of the bulk of Guyanese as being mentally retarded. I join with you in condemning this demonistic behavior on the part of JAGDEO and the PPP. It cannot represent who we are as a people. And if we are to accept by their own statements, that the statements coming out from the Ministry of Health, about the number of persons who are listening to the AP and UAFC, they themselves said over 80% of the population, they are listening to us. And so if you, by your own admission, accept that this 80% listening to us, then what you are saying that this 80% of people are mentally retarded? Are they? I don't think any Guyanese would accept that, and JAGDEO and the PPP must be told that, as I am saying to them today. It's rejected, and it is not who we are. The next issue, of course, I want to deal with, and very, very quickly, has to do with the question of the distribution of these grants for flood relief. We have always said from the beginning, from the time the PPP came into office, that they were just about grabbing money for themselves and their friends. And every single distribution of grants, either cash or kind, it's always been mired in controversy, corruption, and discrimination. So the flood relief is no different from what happened to the COVID-19 grants. It's no different from what happened to the Because We Care grant. This one, of course, is more serious because an assessment had to be made for persons who were affected by flooding which took place earlier this year. And based on that assessment, persons were to be given sums of money that had been approved in the National Assembly. $10 billion approved in the National Assembly. And so an assessment was apparently done, but the assessment did not connect with all of the communities. Several communities, particularly in Region 4, were never visited. Persons who were flooded out were never visited. And so what the PPP did was that they made up a list of persons who were affected and who would get this money. The list, of course, went to Mohammed Zulfikar. He's the Minister of Agriculture. And in that ministry, They started to fumble with the numbers, fidget with the numbers. And persons who were entitled became disentitled. Persons who were not entitled became entitled. And so in many communities, and we have the details of all of this, persons were given $10 million, $5 million, $3 million, $2 million, and some persons 500,000. But the bulk of these were in PBP areas and PBP supporters. And I dare them to challenge that because we have the figures, we have the names, we have the addresses of the people who got it. And we have the figures, we have the information. But we are not in a full position with everything now because we are still analyzing information as it comes in. But we need to let the nation know that we are in receipt of this information and that what it is disclosing at this point in time, again, is rank discrimination in the way in which the grant is being given out. My dear brothers and sisters, there's another matter which pains me to report this morning, since it has to do with the integrity of our education system. The Office of the Leader of the Opposition is in receipt of several reports of inappropriate behavior in relation to this year's National Grade 6 assessment. It's been reported to us by staff members and others who work to support the administration of this year's assessment. And the reports are that the Minister of Education and or persons acting on her behalf have breached the exam protocol in several instances. Some of the acts include accessing the examination papers prior to the examination date, senior officials taking photos of the paper prior to the examination, the Region 9 papers being sent off without an education officer or the appropriate officer being present. The fact that the minister herself actually posted a video, might be on our page or the Education Ministry's page, visiting the marking center. These actions, in the view of the APNU AFC, contradicts basic values of integrity, equity, and public good, ultimately destroying the trust in the education sector that is necessary for the development of our people and this country. These are serious integrity breaches in the education sector, and the coalition condemns these actions by the minister and her persons who are acting on her behalf, as these transgressions can have devastating effects on parents, students, and staff. If not addressed, those actions will have a lasting negative impact on the entire education system in our country. Coalition therefore calls on the PPP regime to take the appropriate corrective measures in this troubling matter. My final point in my statement has to do, ladies and gentlemen, with the issue of a young indigenous lady who was shot by a person who was holding the office of the regional executive officer in Region 9. She was hospitalized for a long period of time. The gentleman was suspended. The young lady is now out out of hospital and at home, but that all sorts of moves are being made to ensure that this REO does not face the full brunt of the law. We are advised that the documents are at the Director of Public Prosecution Office. And what I am saying is that the Director of Public Prosecution must move with the swiftness which she uses in dealing with other matters. There should not be one law for people who live in a certain part of Guyana. If you live in Tocqueville, Georgetown, in Region 4, there's one law for you. And if you live in St. Ignatius, in the Rupununi Region 9, is another law for you. It is the same law, and they should be administered in the same way all across this country. So I'm calling on the DPP to do what you have to do, DPP. This REO should not be at work, making law and breaking law, trying to intervene and all sorts of things. He should be in a place where he cannot affect the outcome of this case. And that is to say, he should be at home or in some cell awaiting the DPP and our determination. But I call upon her to do what you have to do and be expeditious in it. Our indigenous people are entitled to the same protection under the law as any other part of this country or any other Guyanese for that matter. And this is not looking well. It's not looking good because it's a support of the PPP, so you must have a different treatment of the law for him. It does not look good, and we condemn it, and we call upon the DPP to do what she has to do urgently. That is my statement, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Mr. Harmon, for comprehensive statement on a plethora of issues. Ladies and gentlemen of the media, we will now take your questions. And I see that there's an eagerness for questions this morning. We'll start off with Wendell Badri of AGPT TV Night News. Wendell?
Thank you very much, Imran. Thank you very much, Imran. Good morning, colleagues, and Mr. Harmon, good morning to you. I have a number of questions, sir. May I proceed, Imran, if I may be guided? May I proceed to list them all, or should I ask two and then come back?
Yes, let's take two, Wendell, and you'll come back with the others. We'll ensure that you have an opportunity to do so.
Sure. So first up, no confidence motions. There have been 3 at the National Assembly, 2 at the Regional Democratic Council that have been moved by members from the AFC faction of the coalition. Mr. Harmon, could you say whether, based on the moving of those motions at the RDC, there's a rift in the coalition? And if so, what will be done to address it? And as well, if you can make some pronouncement on those no confidence motions at the National Assembly. Also, sir, I am asking for your reaction to the proposed amendment to the Natural Resources Fund Act, as has been touted by the incumbent administration. My 2 questions for now.
Thank you, Wendell.
Sure, Wendell. First of all, let me deal with these no confidence motions. We have 2 no confidence motions that are in the National Assembly, and there's one that has been filed by the administration. The no confidence motions we file are against the Minister of Health and the Minister of Home Affairs for incompetence and the manner in which they have allowed, in the case of the Minister of Health, the COVID-19 pandemic to be impacting on the lives of Guyanese, and the acquisition, of course, of those vaccines, which we are still to get an answer to. And then, of course, the Minister of Home Affairs on the state of public security the state of crime in our country. The fact that all of these drug busts that have taken place all over the world have taken place and still we don't have persons arrested here. The fact that people are gunned down in the streets of this country under the bright lights of the cameras and still we cannot have an arrest. The fact that persons have been released from the prison and who are serving time for serious criminal offenses, and still 65 of them, and still the minister cannot provide this nation with the names of those persons who have been. And that among several other litany. So the no confidence motions that we have filed are grounded in fact and in law. And so they are properly before the National Assembly. We are advised that the Speaker has sent these motions to the Attorney General for him to advise. Well, I don't know if the Attorney General is part of the administration that we are moving the motion against, what advice he is going to give. So it's really, in our view, a cop-out by the Speaker of the National Assembly in that regard. The other, of course, as you said, has to do with no confidence motions that were filed at the RDC level. My understanding is that a motion was brought before the RDC, and the vice chairman who is acting dealt with it. And as far as he's concerned, that motion did not have a proper legal grounding. But it is really what is behind the motion that I think concerns a lot of Guyanese, and the fact that it seems as if there's some rift. I want to say to you and to all Guyanese that the AFC and the APNU are strong members of the coalition. That in every family, you'll always have sometimes levels of disagreement. And like old people say, teeth and tongue must bite sometimes. But I can say to you that at the level of the leadership of the AFC and APNU, that these issues are being resolved and will be resolved. And they'll be resolved to the benefit of the people of Region 4 that are affected by this motion, and so that we can have a smooth movement in the RDC on issues which affect the thousands of Guyanese who voted for us and voted for us to be there. So I want to say that, you'll have statements being made by persons, and this is what I call the strength of our democracy, that we are able to deal with dissension that occurs within our rank from time to time, and that we come out of it stronger. We believe that we are better together, and the statements, as you see, coming out from the parties that actually make them address that issue, that they are of the firm conviction that we are better together, and that working together, we can really move against this authoritarian regime which we have to deal with. So I want to say that insofar as the no confidence motions are concerned, that there are matters which will be dealt with internally. As I said, one motion came up before the RDC. The vice chairman dealt with it in a proper way, and I'm very proud of the way in which he has dealt with it. And I am proud of our councillors. As I said, sometimes they have this tendency to speak out, and that is what our democratic system allows. We will deal with those matters internally, and I believe that it will only strengthen our coalition and strengthen our resolve to come against the entity that's discriminating against our people, discriminating in the way the resources are allocated. And even in regions which we have won electorally, because they control the regional executive officers, and because of an intervening or interfering minister of local government, that they tend to get right down into the result of the RDCs, and in some cases NDCs, trying to direct them what to do. But I think that this is an issue which we will deal with internally. Already we've had some meetings on this issue, and we've agreed on a way forward. And I am confident that we are going to overcome this little hurdle as seems to be in the public domain. The Resources Act, the amendments to it, I'm not in a position right now, Wendell, to advise fully on it. It's something that is being addressed in the MPs group. In fact, we met only yesterday, and this was one of the matters which came up. So I'm really not fully prepared to address the amendments at this point in time. But certainly, in a short space of time after it's been addressed within the group, then I will make public what our position is.
Thank you, Mr. Harmon. We have a question coming from Adam Harris. Wendell, we'll come back to you for your further questions. Adam, go.
Yes. Yes, sir. A very good morning. Yes, it's still morning. Mr. Opposition Leader, Mr. Shearer made big of posting a 28-page document accusing the coalition of blatant racism. And more recently, the government benches have been accusing you of racism. How do you respond to such accusations, sir?
Adam, thank you for that question. I'm trying to find this 28-page document, you know. I hear about it, and I'm trying to find it. So I can only respond to the statement which was put out 7 days after the 28-page document was alleged to have been circulated to all these international agencies. And I did, in fact, make a very clear statement a few days ago on what Gail Teixeira was saying. And that I don't think that Gail Teixeira or the PPP, that they have any moral gravitas to speak about racism. To begin with, if we understand how racism works, it is he who holds the key to the economic powers of this country and applies it in a way that is based on ethnicity. That is how we become racist. Many of us have our preferences, our ethnic preferences, and we are being socialized in a certain way. But certainly as a coalition, we believe that for Guyana to progress, social cohesion is a vital element in it. And so when we came into office in 2015, Adam, one of the first directions that was given was for the establishment of a ministry that deals with social cohesion. That several officers were given specified training in that regard. That if you look at the makeup, the ethnic balance in our coalition, you'll see what we're talking about. When we were in office, look at what our front bench looked like, and look at what the PPP front bench looked like. Even now we're in the opposition, look at our front bench and tell me what you see if you don't see Guyana reflected there. Look at the composition of our representatives in the National Assembly and tell me what you see. So when they speak about us being racist, we are the MPs who speak about this issue. They are representing how people feel on the ground. All of those communities that they go to, and the communities make complaints about the discriminatory way in which they are dealt with based on the fact that they are Afro-Guyanese or that they are supporters of the APNU AFC. They tell you that. There are some particular cases where youngsters who are part of a cricket team, some Indians, some Afro-Guyanese, part of a cricket team living in the same community, and the resources are distributed to that community. And the fellows who are Afro-Guyanese are bypassed. The Indo-Guyanese youth who are part of that team turn to the people who are distributing and say, what happened to these fellas here, man? They live right here, they suffer like we, they are in the same cricket team together. Why are they not given the resource? And so when you can actually see in communities, Indo-Guyanese, Afro-Guyanese, basically making that complaint against this regime, you understand what we are talking about. And so Gail Teixeira's response, or Gail Teixeira's outburst, was a response to what happened on the 15th of August in the United States of America. And the statements which emanated from Congressman Hakeem Jeffries, and the statements which were made by US leaders, and the fact that people were focused on the ethnic discrimination that was taking place in Guyana, that Gail Teixeira was scrambling to put together a dossier, which, as I said, I want to see, because I would like to respond line by line, paragraph by paragraph, section by section. I want to do that. But she puts out a release 7 days, because the statement says that this dossier was circulated on the 18th of August, which was 3 days after the march. And the release now she gives about it is the 25th of August, 7 days later. Well, if this thing is so urgent, why haven't you put it out in the newspaper, put out everything, put it online so we can actually go and see it? And we can deal with it there, Gail Teixeira. But don't try to hoodwink people. In our view, this was an attempt to hoodwink Guyanese. This was an attempt just like the late night $25,000 one-off by Irfan Ali that sought to change the conversation from their ethnic-based policies. Change the conversation. And knowing fully well that giving this money as he did is going to be another scandal. Giving money to GPL to pass it on to consumers who are consuming a certain level, you are now putting in the hands of GPL a little cash grant. It's a bailout to GPL. And the others, of course, are what you call one-off payments. When they can get this money? You still ain't finished dealing with COVID-19 cash grants yet. You still got people still holding pink slips. You know, dealing with flood and the discrimination in the way in which that flood relief is being given out. Now you're telling me about a 25,000 here and 25,000 there. Putting it in GPL hand to give to deal with people. And dealing with the people who are especially challenged and old age pensioners. This was just a little, I mean, the fact of the matter is, Adam, that look, whatever money that comes to the people, I think they should take it. It's our money. They're entitled to it. But don't throw it out like if it's sweetie money, that you come in the middle of the night and say, okay, like I are listening to this big announcement to be made. Why couldn't it have been made the next day or the day after? Because in any event, from the time that instruction is given, the way how the government system works, it will take at least a month or so before that actually kicks in. a month or more. So you're talking almost, this is the end of August, you probably looking till almost Christmas time for that come out, for that money. But the intention was to divert attention to what took place in New York and what the Guyanese people considered to be critical issues which are affecting their lives and their livelihood. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harmon. We have another question coming from Sean Embrack, News Talk Radio. Sean, go ahead. Sean, you'll need to unmute your microphone.
Yes, good day. Sorry about that. I have two questions for you, Mr. Harmon. The first one is on the COVID cash grant and flood relief. The opposition has been calling for investigation and audit of these grants because you suspect and you said you have evidence of malfeasance in the way these grants were and are being distributed. The government is not budged by your call because there haven't been any audit being done as yet, although the president had said that he will have the COVID cash grant audited. There's no audit. Will the opposition be presenting whatever findings or evidence that you have, right, to the public and to the media to show where these malfeasance took place and as a way to force the hand of the government to conduct an audit and present a true picture of what took place with the distribution of the COVID cash grant and what is going on with the flood relief. My second question is, you've mentioned that you support call by Senior Congressman Jeffries for the removal of Ambassador Cyril Lynch from Guyana. Will the opposition be making a formal request to the US government, laying out its claims as to why you want the Ambassador Cyril Lynch to be removed as ambassador to Guyana? That's my two questions.
Thank you very much. Two good questions. First of all, let me say that the COVID-19 cash grant, I think there is an abundance of information about malfeasance in the manner in which it was distributed. Information which we have and information which the government has. And this was the basis. In fact, before President Ali instructed that this audit be done, we have started to provide information about persons who are just being left with pink slips and the persons who are being bypassed. So that information we had already started to communicate with the Ministry of Social Protection. And the government, they have that information. So it is not a case now anymore where we have to justify this. If the president of this country orders an audit to be done, the Auditor General is bound to do so. And we have been pressing for this, and he has not been answering. In fact, I think it was until the Village Voice or somebody interviewed him, that is when he heard that he's saying that somebody who was engaged in the process died in an accident in Region 9. But I mean, as a president, would you accept that as being an excuse from the Auditor General? This is an Auditor General that jumps at everything that has to do with the APNU. If you hear that somebody buy a wristwatch, yes, oh, go and do an audit here. If you hear that somebody cut the hair too low, go and audit it. If you hear somebody buy a chair and table, go and audit it. But a major issue which affects this country he's silent on. And, you know, the president has to use his authority where he has it. Use it. Call in the Auditor General and give him a deadline to finish this audit. I don't have to come as the opposition and justify anything anymore. You have been given an instruction by the president. If he doesn't carry it out, then fire him. Find somewhere, get rid of him. But if he cannot carry out your instructions, just as you do with all of the other public servants, they didn't have to do anything, but they were fired just because they were there and they might have been working on the AP and AFC, fire them. You have an opportunity now. He has violated, he has disobeyed your instructions. And this is what I would say. I would call upon the president to discipline or get rid of the Auditor General because he's not acting in the best interest of the people of Guyana. That is where this ought to go. I don't have to go and justify anything anymore. That is where it has to go. He must justify. The president has instructed an audit. And I understand you already started collecting the information. What are you doing with it? Get on with the business, man. The second thing, of course, the second question you spoke about is whether we will make a formal request. As I said, I joined with Congressman Jeffries. Congressman Jeffries, of course, as you know, is not without resources and not without contact. He has the ear of the President of the United States. He is in the caucuses that are critical to the management and the administration of the United States government. And I can only join with him. I don't have to make a separate case. The case has been made. And several statements have been made about Congressman Jeffries' statement. Congressman Jeffries is not is a congressman. He doesn't have to listen to any particular person. They seem to want to believe that what we are saying to the congressman make it moving. These congressmen have offices. They have a whole host of staff and advisors. So before they make a statement, all of the information which go to them pass through a mill. It passes through a mill. It is assessed and it is collated, it is analyzed before they go and make a statement. If you look at a hearing, a congressional hearing, if you look at what happens in the Congress and so on in the United States, you sit down, you see a congressman there, you see 5, 6 people behind him, lawyers and all sorts of things. These are people who are employed as part of the office of the congressman. So, you know, it is not just a willy-nilly statement. It is not no fly-by-night statement. And so the most I can do, as I said, is to embrace that position which the congressman has publicly taken, and which I think now that the ambassador has actually made those statements in Texas, concretizes that belief that she has outlived her time as an ambassador in Guyana. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harmon, for those responses. Wendell Badri, would you like to come back with your additional questions now?
Yes, Imran, thank you.
All right.
Mr. Harmon, your reactions to the Birth and Death Registration Act, which was passed in the National Assembly recently, the effect it might have, of course, ultimately on the voters list. And then, of course, sir, there seems to be some sort of power struggle within your party, the PNC. How has that affected your ability to function in your office as leader of the opposition? And, you know, even the party standing. I'll maybe close off with those two for now. Oh, maybe may I pitch in one more? Sorry, your reaction
Yes.
to the holding of local government elections.
Okay. Now, the question of the births and death and the amendments which were made, you would recognize that we took a very strong line on this particular amendment which was made, which allows for justices of the peace and maybe two shows to be able to sign off on these applications, and on that basis, birth certificates are issued. And based on the birth certificates that are issued, those persons now become eligible to be considered to go on the voters list. It's a concern which we have. It's a concern which we have voiced. And we are looking at other ways in which we will take action in that regard. Of course, the amendment was passed in the National Assembly because of the PVP numbers, but not without a very strong resistance from us on the floor. What we believe is that the PPP will seek to use this avenue to allow for persons who are not Guyanese to be given Guyanese birth certificate. We know how the PPP behave. When we came into office in 2015, in fact, even before 2015, we were told by some of our supporters who work in some of these offices about people working overnight, day and night, on the floor of the office of the birth certificate office upstairs at the post office there, signing off on birth certificates to people to get so they can be registered. And we cannot disassociate this amendment to the law. We cannot disassociate it with statements which have been made by senior persons in the PPP. In particular, a statement made by Robert Prasad on the Essequibo coast, maybe 2 months or so ago. I was on the coast the same time when he was there, and he was talking to a group of Venezuelans and saying to them that they're looking at creating economic space for 50,000 Venezuelans. And certainly, we have to connect that intention on the part of the PPP with this amendment that is made to the act. So what that does now is to give everybody birth certificate. You're born in Guyana, you're born all over, but you become a Guyanese because you got a birth certificate, and that entitles you to be placed on the voters list after you have gone through the registration process. But at every stage of the game, we will have to be very vigilant in what we do and how we go about doing it. We are still also looking at other forms of challenges which can be made to that piece of legislation, but we have not gone very far in the work which we are doing. But it will have to, of course, require political action on the part of all of our supporters on the ground to ensure that persons who are not born in Guyana, that they are not given birth certificates simply because an amendment had been made to the law to facilitate persons who are not Guyanese to get Guyanese birth certificate. The next issue, of course, you spoke about is the issues which affect the People's National Congress. That, of course, has been in the news for some time. And I think that they are basically the statements speak towards the Congress and the process of electing a leader at the time when Congress comes about. So this is what happens in vibrant parties. The PNC, of course, you know, is a party that is over 60 years old. And so it has a very strong democratic tradition. And so what is happening now, I am convinced, based on my own understanding, my service in the PNC, that this is a process which we will overcome, and with the proper announcements that are to be made about the date for Congress and the procedures that follow from that. And I think that a lot of what you're seeing will basically come to an end. But I believe that it is basically the democratic strength of our party which allows for that kind of statements to be made. Some of it, of course, I don't believe ought to have been made in the public, but certainly statements have been made, they are in the public, and we have to face it. That is the reality. But I would want to say that the PNC remains strong, remains united, remains a very viable member of the APNU and APNU-ESC coalition. As the leader of the opposition, I can say to you that I cannot bury my head in the sand to say that it has not affected in some way the work of the parliamentary group. But I am convinced, I am satisfied that the work of the parliamentary group is not adversely affected by it. Of course, your members will speak to these issues from time to time. And as the leader of the opposition, I am satisfied that our MPs are focused, and their focus is on getting rid of the PPP. That is their focus. Until yesterday, we met as MPs group, and the issues which we discussed were issues which affect our national interest. Many of the matters which I have actually raised here in my press statement were issues which were discussed and deliberated upon at that forum. And I think that we will continue to keep our eyes on the PPP. Internally, the parties will sort themselves out. The APNU, the AFC will sort themselves out and the issues which affect them. But I can say to you that, that our focus continues to be on the People's Progressive Party. Local government elections, are due by the end of this year. I've heard statements to the effect that local government elections will be held, but I don't know how they're going to hold it. What I can say to you is that we are not prepared to go into elections with this same bloated list. The list has to be cleansed. We believe that a process of house-to-house registration again has to be dealt with, and that is the way to cleanse the voters list. You can only go to another elections with a cleansed voters list. And that is our absolute position, that is what we believe, and that it is up to the state and it's up to GCOM to put their houses in order to ensure that those things happen. How they do it, they have to know. They have the resources, they have the people. They have basically dismantled a major part of GCOM so that they can filter in, the people can filter in some of their own people there. But we're going to keep a very careful eye on that, and to the extent to which, as the opposition, that I have any say in the matter, that certainly you will know that my voice will be on the side of the people, and that we have to have a cleansed voters list before we proceed to any form of election, local government or general and regional elections. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Harmon. We will wrap up with the final two questions if there are more questions. Adam, Wendell. Go ahead, Wendell.
Yes, Imran. So my final question. Sir, Mr.
We'll take
Harmon,
this as the final question, Wendell. Go ahead.
very well, no problem. Sir, could you say whether you plan on meeting with the president regarding constitutional appointments? We heard some statements being proffered to that effect from the Minister of Governance and Parliamentary Affairs. Do you plan to meet with the president with regard to those constitutional appointments?
Wendell, this is a matter that Irfaan Ali has to deal with. I have said time and again that in the national interest, I am prepared to meet. But I am not prepared to meet on my knees. I'm not prepared to bow down. When I meet, I am meeting as a representative of over half of the population of Guyana. And so I don't want to have to take Gail Teixeira's word for it. But Irfan Ali himself has spoken, and so we have to take that word, not Gail Teixeira. That, that our resolve to engagement will be tested about this and tested about that. I'm not moved by Gail Teixeira. The two presidents that we have got to speak. And there's Irfan Ali and Bara Jagdeo, the joint presidents. I'm not dealing with Gail Teixeira. When it comes from them, then we know that we are basically talking about serious issues. And that is what I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Harmon, for another very lengthy and comprehensive press conference. I'll allow just a few seconds if any media person would like to squeeze in a final question. It doesn't appear as though anyone is so inclined. So, Mr. Harmon, thank you very much for this press conference. Would you like to take an opportunity to make some quick final remarks before we close?
No, Abraham, I just want to thank all of the persons who attended this press conference. I want to say to all Guyanese who are resisting these mandatory measures that are being put in place, that I stand firmly with you, wherever you are in this country. From the east to the west, from the north to the south, I stand with you, my MP stand with you, and you know that you have my full support in resisting any form of discrimination or any attempt at forcing things down your throat and your arms, which you have a constitutional right to, and you have a choice in determining how it should be done. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Harmon. We'd like to thank all the members of the media who have joined us and the many persons who have been following this press conference's live stream online. We want to wish our colleague, Marvin Williams, who is recovering from COVID in the ICU, and all the other persons in the ICU and all the persons who have contracted COVID and are recovering, best wishes for a speedy and full recovery. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, and do enjoy the rest of the day and have a safe weekend ahead. Goodbye.